I don't even know where to start with this. Hey everybody, and welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be talking about my most disappointing books of 2020. We're gonna start off hot, so grab a drink, grab a snack, and let's get right into the video. I do want to start off by saying that if any of your favorite books are on this list, please know that everybody has different reading tastes, and something that works for me might work for you and vice versa. I'm not trying to attack the book, I'm just trying to explain why I either didn't vibe with it or didn't like it. Actually, most of these books I didn't hate. I actually quite enjoyed some of them. I just didn't enjoy them the way I thought I was going to enjoy them. Some of these books I thought I would absolutely love. I thought they were going to be new favorites, and they just weren't. And I'm here to explain why. So I think I'll just go ahead and rip the band-aid off and start off with a really popular book, and that is going to be The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins. I did read the entire trilogy in 2020, so it's the entire trilogy that was disappointing for me. If you don't know what this book is about, we essentially follow our main character, Katniss Everdeen, who volunteers as a tribute in place of her sister. Every year there is what they call the Hunger Games, in which the 12 districts of Pena have to select 2 tributes to go ahead and compete. This was essentially a punishment created a long time ago when the districts tried to revolt against the capital, and as a punishment, their kids have to fight to the death with only one survivor. I grew up watching the Hunger Games, and so I really actually enjoyed the movies, and I wanted to try reading the books since I was such a big fan of the movies. And you know, maybe I should stop doing that because there's another book on here that's a similar story. I watched the movie, went to the book, ended up liking the movie more than the book. So let's start off with what I really liked about this book. Right from the beginning, I was caught by the setting. I wanted to know the history of Panem. I wanted to know why these Hunger Games existed. I also really liked Collins' writing style. It's very simple and very concise. That really worked for me, especially as this was one of the first fantasy books that I ever read. Starting off with the Hunger Games was a lot easier than starting off with Robin Hobb, for example. I really enjoyed exploring the world through Katniss's perspective. Unfortunately, that's also one of the cons of this book for me specifically. I feel that some of her characters are a little bit too flat for me, too one-dimensional. For me, that becomes even more apparent in the other books. I ultimately felt that things were happening to Katniss as opposed to Katniss driving the plot, as she should be, because she is our strong female character. So that really detracted from my reading experience overall. The other element that this book was missing for me was depth in emotions. A lot of these characters go through the Hunger Games every single year. And I know this has been going on for decades. I'm sure because of that they might be a little jaded, but these are kids that are being randomly selected to go off and kill other kids. There just wasn't a strong aversion to this or strong sadness or anger that I was able to detect right from the beginning within these characters. Yeah, they might have been jaded, but it's kids, they're kids. This is actively televised. People watch the Hunger Games. So I wanted a little bit more anger from the people or from Katniss. I wanted a little bit more emotion. I wanted the characters to care a little more for me to really be invested in the story and in the narrative and in the characters. And I just didn't find that here. And because of that, I had to give it a 3 out of 5. Again, that is not a bad rating. That's actually a good rating. 3 out of 5 is a solid good book for me. It's just I thought I was going to completely love this series, and unfortunately, I just didn't. The next disappointing book on this list for me is Dune by Herbert. People that love this book tend to have very strong opinions about it, as I've learned in the past. So again, I didn't hate this book, but I didn't love it. And if you think I'm wrong, please engage with me in the comments. I would love to hear your thoughts. I don't even know where to start with this. When I was younger, I grew up watching Tremors, and I don't know why, but I completely adored those movies. They were just some of my movies ever to watch and rewatch every year. So when I heard about Dune and about the giant worms, I was like, yep, sign me up, I'm gonna read it, here I go. And so I did, and I didn't love it. I can't deny the impacts that Dune has had on the sci-fi genre. His impact is imperative, it's foundational, and that can never be negated. But that's not what I'm talking about here. I'm not talking about the lasting impacts of Dune. I'm talking about the book and its contents and the story that is told solely in its book format. and that I had a little bit trouble with, or trouble getting into. So let's start talking about what I did like. I really enjoyed the world building. It was fantastic. This world is vast, it's huge, and there's a lot of political machinations that are going on, which is another part that I highly enjoyed. I love that Frank Herbert just throws you right into the middle and you have to figure out what's going on. By the way, I also gave this book a 3 out of 5. Now let's get into my criticisms of this book. So the things that I didn't like can fall into 3 different categories. Let's start off with the first one. The characters, specifically Paul's character. Before I start off this comment, I know that I'm going to get comments. I'm trying to keep this video non-spoiler, so I'm going to try to be as vague as possible, but I know some people in the comments are going to say that Paul is written in a way in which Herbert tries to criticize that type of character. I just think that Herbert could have written Paul in a more nuanced and subtle way that still managed to get his point across without alienating so many readers. Right off the bat, Paul is extremely annoying. He is your stereotypical chosen one who can do no wrong. He's so good at everything, and yes, he's had years of training, I get that, but he's still a young boy who's driven by emotions, and yes, he's learned to control those too, but he's still a young boy. I think any kid has impulses, no matter how great they're trained, and no matter how long they're trained. He's a boy, and he's just too perfect for me in this novel. I really wanted Paul to be a little bit more complex and more dynamic, and I just didn't get that. My second criticism of this book relates a little bit to our first one, and that is Herbert's writing style. I feel like if Herbert was a better writer, he could have written Paul in a more complex and nuanced way. And unfortunately, I think that he didn't have those skills to write Paul as a better character. Within that same vein of Herbert's writing style, Dune is written in third-person omniscient, and I hadn't read a book that was written in that format before, and it didn't work for me. Parts of the plot and the tension that was built in Dune felt fabricated to me because we're constantly knowing what everybody's thinking, what everybody's doing. There's no air of suspense. There's even little, I don't even know what they are, like journal entries from Princess Irulan where she tells you what's gonna happen chapters ahead of time, so you're like, oh, okay, I mean, that happened, so why keep reading? Which was a little bit demotivating to keep going on with the book, especially because it's so long and Herbert's writing style isn't the easiest or the friendliest to get into. Another impact of having this type of writing style is that I felt like a story was being told to me instead of feeling like I was there. One of the strengths of this book is the world building, and when you first start it, you're dropped right into the plot, which I loved. But after that initial like bam, it feels like someone's just telling you a story, and I wanted to experience that story for myself. My final criticism of this book is that there's thinly veiled homophobic, racist, and fatphobic statements that are made. They're not super noticeable all the time. Let's take our main villain, for example. He is often characterized as this ugly, fat, degrading person, and it seems that that is what makes him disgusting and evil. It's never explained why he's evil. He just describes him in ways that are fatphobic and homophobic. So that really just, again, I know that a lot of my criticisms of this initial book will probably be solved through the end of the series, so I do plan on rereading Dune later this year and continuing on with the series, and hopefully now that I am used to Herbert's writing style, I'm able to just plow through and really enjoy the story and really get to know the characters and the themes, because that is what I'm here for. Let's change up the pace for a little bit and talk about a thriller. This one is called A Stranger in the House, and it's by Shari Pena. I ended up actually quite enjoying the overall plot line. It's a psychological thriller. So we follow our main character, Karen as she's driving home from a restaurant in a part of town that she never really goes to. She ends up getting in a car accident and then she has amnesia. Karen doesn't know why she was in that part of town. She can't remember anything. Nonetheless, she doesn't remember anything, and then she starts to notice that things are moving on around her house and she thinks someone's watching her. So that's the basic premise of the book. I usually like unreliable narrators. I like it when there's some form of amnesia that's going on. I think it can be a really cool plot device, but it was just, so let me start off with that. It's a forgettable book. I enjoyed it while I read it. Months later, like 5 months later, I have no idea what this book is about. If I would have just picked it up and you asked me what it was about, I couldn't tell you. I couldn't even remember the character's name. Which brings me to my second point. Not only is this book forgettable, but the characters are also forgettable and annoying. The thing that annoyed me the most about this book is our main character, Tom. He's just a piece of, he's a piece of work, y'all. There's so many things wrong with him. All of a sudden she gets in a car accident. She's healing from that and he's like, ooh, I don't know this woman anymore. All I gotta say. So I wasn't a really big fan. I gave it a 2 out of 5. That's it, we're moving on. The next book on this list is a book that I've talked about in the past, and it's another TV movie adaptation. So I watched Crazy Rich Asians a while back, and it's one of my favorite romance movies. I love watching it. It's my comfort. It's something that I watch whenever I want to feel bubbly and like giddy inside. So I picked up Crazy Rich Asians, but it's just a book that's not for me. It's too over the top, it's too dramatic for me. There's a lot of descriptions of opulent mansions and incredible wealth, and that's not what bothered me. It's the way that people act. Even in romances, I feel like I need my stakes to be high, and for them, everything's kind of just a game. There were no high stakes. I wasn't invested in the characters, and that's what annoyed me the most, that everybody was so over the top that I couldn't relate to them. Like, I couldn't even imagine an alternate universe where I could relate to them. So unfortunately, I didn't like it. The next books on my list is actually another series, and I feel like I'm pretty vocal about not enjoying this series, but that is The Mortal Instruments by Cassandra Clare. Now, before you get mad at me, I love the Infernal Devices. Tessa, Will, and Jem will forever crush my heart, throw it out and spit on it. I love that series and I can't wait to start Chain of Gold. But the Mortal Instruments just wasn't my cup of tea. Because of the Mortal Instruments, I thought that I didn't like urban fantasy. That's how much I disliked it. But then I read Trail of Lightning, the Six-Fold series by Rebecca Roanhorse. Now I know that I do like urban fantasy. If you don't know what this series is about, we follow our main character, Clare, after her mom's been abducted. Through this abduction, she gets help from unlikely characters and she discovers the world of these shadow hunters. Shadow hunters are basically modern day warriors who fight against demons and protect the earth in the shadows. What I liked about this book, I liked how easy it was to read. It was another series that also got me more into fantasy. It made me more intrigued with what authors can do within a fantasy world. What I really didn't vibe with in this particular series are the characters. I found our main character, Clare. I just found her to be extremely annoying. I just wanted to pull my hair out whenever Clare talked. I'm going to get into some really quick spoilers, so if you don't want to hear this, I will just go ahead and put the timestamp down below when they stopped. But things that Clare did, like with Simon, like she's like, I'm not into Simon, but then Simon is into someone else, and she's like, maybe I'm into Simon, and then she tries to get him jealous, and she's like, oh, I love Chase, but Simon is no longer interested in me. I need men to fawn over me, even though I'm not even interested and I'm just roping them along. So I wasn't feeling that. And then another part that I wasn't feeling is the whole incest, not incest. That was what I didn't like about the Mortal Instruments. Sorry. The next book on this list is The Dreamers, and this is by Thompson Walker. This is a sci-fi book in which there is this small town in Southern California where people start to fall asleep. And this starts to happen and spread. And so this town is then placed on quarantine because these people are not waking up. Really cool concept, right? Super intrigued. I was like, whoa, what's going on? And I got into a lot of like post-apocalyptic fiction when we were in quarantine, and this one was one that really stood out to me. What did I like about this book? I liked the concept. What I didn't enjoy is the execution. There's a book on my top 10 of 2020, I'll link that video up in the cards, that does this concept extremely well, and that was Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel. She did a wonderful job at crafting different characters whose stories blend together and like create a cohesive narrative. That's what this book tried to do, but its execution was not great. The different character narratives that we follow do not blend well together. They're very jarring. They just didn't blend well together for me. Another thing that I didn't like is the concepts behind this weren't really explained. And I don't need that all the time. I read another great book where that happened called The Memory Police by Yoko Ogawa. Nothing is ever explained, and that's fine because there's deeper meanings and themes that you really get to explore. I didn't feel that with this book. There was nothing deeper. There was nothing that was more nuanced. It was just a very badly written story. So unfortunately, this didn't work for me. The next book on this list is one that really disappointed me because I was really excited to get more into this genre. It is a flintlock fantasy, and that is Promise of Blood by Brian McClellan. I'm not really sure how to pronounce his name, but this was the December pick for the Shelf Space Book Club. I'll link the details down below. And I just, this was similar to The Dreamers in that I think the concept and the ideas behind this book are excellent, and it had tons of potential, but unfortunately for me, they ended up falling flat, and they really disappointed me. So this is a multiple POV flintlock epic fantasy, and in it we follow our three main characters, Tomas, Taniel, and Adamat. The beginning of the book throws you right in. You are in the middle of the coup where the king is slaughtered, and it really engages the reader to find out how they're going to keep control and how everything's going to happen. I was really intrigued the first couple of chapters. However, I was equally confused. And that is another criticism for me in this book, is that there's so many ideas here. We have basically three magic systems because some aren't really magic, but there's three different types of characters in this book. And because there's so many ideas and different things we're exploring, none of them are ever really fleshed out entirely. And we have basically one storyline in which there's a bunch of info dumping, like this character is your info dump character. So I didn't really enjoy that aspect. I wish the author would have just picked one of those elements and really fleshed it out and then provided more information in additional books. I feel like that would have worked a lot better for me. And then the other thing that I didn't like in this book was the representation of women. I feel like I would have liked this book a lot more if there were no women in it at all, as opposed to the women that we do have. We only have 4 female characters, I believe. I can't really remember. But the most complex and most developed female character in this book is not only mute, so completely taking away her agency and her means to communicate and her but they also call her a savage multiple times. Yeah, I mean, I have a problem with that. So I ended up giving this book a 2 out of 5 stars. I forgot to mention what I did like about this book, and I thought the magic system was very creative. I was genuinely intrigued by the magic system, and I just wish that magic system would have been better fleshed out for me to continue. So I won't be continuing on with this series. The last book on this list is one that pains me, and similarly to other books, this isn't a bad book, it's just one that I had really high expectations for. I thought this book was going to be my favorite read of the year, and unfortunately it wasn't. And that book for me is Anxious People by Fredrik Backman. Now in this book, we follow a failed bank robber. They try to rob a cashless bank at the beginning of the book, and in their attempt to escape, they accidentally end up with a hostage crisis. There is an apartment viewing across the street where there's a lot of people. They just happen to walk in there, and the story goes on from there. What did I like about this book? I love the delectable writing. Fredrik Backman's writing is one of my favorites. I love the way that he writes plot, and I especially love the way that he writes characters. I feel like that is his biggest strength. His characters are always chef's kiss. So what I didn't like in this book, let me start off by saying that I think if I read this at the right time, I would have loved it. Similarly to The Perks of Being a Wallflower, I read that book at the right time, and because of that, it's just one of my favorite books of all time. This book, how do I explain what I didn't like about this book? Let me start off by making a comparison. So in fantasy books, you go in as a reader expecting to suspend your disbelief. You know that there's going to be some elements that you can't explain away or rationalize. That's not how I go in as a reader into contemporaries, because it's a contemporary. And so because of that, I couldn't suspend my disbelief. And I found some parts of this book to be ridiculous, if I'm being completely honest. They were just unbelievable. The way the people treated each other, and the way the people treated the police, and the way the police treated the people, that's not how the world works. 2020 has shown us how the world works. I couldn't put myself in the shoes of someone who really loved this book, because I couldn't, unfortunately, believe some of the stuff that happens in this book. Let's talk about the positive of this next point. I love the mental health representation in this book. I thought that loneliness and grief and suicide, I thought that some of these topics were handled with a lot of care, the care that they require, but they are serious topics. And so what really pushed it to my disappointing side is that, again, Fredrik Backman is an excellent writer. He writes people so well. So naturally, these topics are handled very nicely. And what I didn't like is that on top of this, he ended up wrapping this big bow of awe and cuteness. I'm cute, I'm a big fluff of hug. That to me felt a little bit disingenuous, and because of that, I just couldn't, on a personal level, relate to what these people were going through. And I know I'm in the minority in this, I know. And I do love Fredrik Backman's work. Beartown was one of my favorite reads of last year. Yeah, so those were all my disappointing books of 2020. Let me know down below if you read any of them, if you disagree with me or agree with me. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you on the next one. Bye!